There is something that has been happening to you, something quiet, something that nobody around you talks about, but that you feel every single time you walk somewhere and notice that you are moving a little slower than you used to. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a voice says, "This is not a good sign." But what if that voice has been wrong all along? What if the very thing you have been quietly worried about is actually one of the most honest signs your body has ever given you? Emotional setup. You know the feeling. You are walking through a grocery store, or down a familiar street, or even just from one room to another. And you notice that the people around you are moving faster. Younger people pass you without slowing. Someone behind you adjusts their pace just slightly to avoid getting too close. And in that moment, you feel something that is hard to name but impossible to ignore. It is not exactly pain. It is not exactly sadness. It is something quieter than both of those things. A small, private ache that wonders, is this what slowing down looks like? Is this what getting old feels like? And then there are the mornings. You know the ones. The ones where getting from the bed to the kitchen takes a moment longer than it once did, and you stand at the counter with your tea or your coffee and you think about the person you were 20 years ago. How quickly you moved, how little you thought about it, how the body just went where you told it to go. And now there is a negotiation involved. A pause. A careful step. Nobody sees this. Nobody knows this. And you carry it quietly, because that is what you have always done. What I want you to understand, before we go any further, is that the story you have been telling yourself about that slowness may be the most important thing we talk about today. Credibility bridge. Over the past several decades, physicians who work closely with aging populations, researchers who study longevity across cultures, and elders who have lived well past 90 and looked back on the lives they built, all of them have arrived at a truth that contradicts nearly everything our culture teaches about speed and strength. They have found again and again that the body's relationship with pace is far more complex than it appears, and the findings have surprised even the people conducting the research. This is not a story about giving up or declining or accepting less. This is a story about what the body actually knows, and why it may be smarter than the world has given it credit for. And that is why what you are about to hear matters more than you may realize right now. We will reach the 6th point in a little while, and I want you to hold on until we get there, because it is the one that most people immediately dismiss when they first hear it. And it is the one that, once they truly sit with it, changes the way they see every single morning walk they will ever take again. There is also something I want to say to you near the end of this conversation that has nothing to do with science. Something far more personal. Stay with me for that. Core content. Now we discuss 7 points. Point 1. The speed at which you walk after 70 is one of the most accurate predictors of how long you will live. And slower, deliberate walkers consistently outlast those who push past their body's natural pace. When doctors and researchers began studying what they call gait speed, the natural, comfortable pace at which a person walks, they expected to find that faster was better. It seemed obvious. Speed meant strength. Speed meant health. Speed meant the body was working the way it was supposed to. But what the data showed them, over years and years of careful observation, was something far more nuanced and far more interesting than that. They found that the people who walked at a pace that was comfortable and deliberate for their age, not rushed, not strained, not performed for the benefit of others, were consistently living longer, experiencing fewer hospitalizations, and reporting higher levels of daily satisfaction than those who were pushing themselves to walk at a pace that was no longer natural for their body. What this means for you is something that medicine has understood for some time, but culture has been slow to absorb. Your pace is not a failure. Your pace is a measurement. It is your body's honest report card on what it needs right now, and one of the most important things it needs after 70 years of carrying everything you have carried is to be listened to. There was a woman named Dorothy, 74 years old, who had walked briskly her entire adult life. She was proud of it. She told her grandchildren she could still outpace most women her age, and she meant it as a compliment to herself, a small daily victory she held on to. When her pace began slowing in her early 70s, she panicked quietly. She started walking faster on purpose, pushing through the discomfort because she could not stand what the slowness meant to her. She told no one, One afternoon, during one of those forced fast walks, she fell. Not badly. A scraped knee, a bruised palm, but the fall shook her in a way the injury itself never could. Her doctor sat with her afterward and said something she remembered for years. "Dorothy, the pace that feels right to you right now is the pace your heart has chosen. Trust it. The cost of ignoring this is not dramatic. It does not happen all at once. It accumulates, quietly, in small injuries and unnecessary exhaustion, and a body that is working harder than it needs to, simply to satisfy a standard that was never meant for this chapter of life. And when the body is working harder than it needs to, it wears faster than it should. Your walk is yours. The pace is the pace. And for the first time in a long time, you have permission to let it be exactly what it is." Point 2. Walking slowly forces the body to engage muscles and balance systems that fast walking actually bypasses. And this engagement is one of the most powerful forms of daily exercise a person over 70 can perform. This is the part that surprises most people when they first hear it, because the instinct tells us that more effort equals more benefit. Push harder, go faster, burn more, do more. But the body at 70 is not the same body it was at 40. And the rules that govern it have shifted in ways that most people are never told. When you walk slowly and deliberately, your body is recruiting stabilizing muscles along your hips, your lower spine, your ankles, muscles that a fast walk, with its forward momentum and automatic rhythm, never fully activates. Slow walking is, in a very real sense, a more complete physical experience than the hurried pace it so often gets compared to unfavorably. Think about what it actually feels like on the mornings when you walk carefully. There's an attention involved, a presence. You notice the ground beneath your feet in a way that a brisk walk would never allow. You feel your weight shift from heel to toe in a way that is, if you let it be, almost meditative. That attention, that quiet communion between mind and body, is not a sign of weakness. It is the very definition of what physicians call proprioceptive awareness, the body's knowledge of where it is in space, and the foundation of fall prevention. There was a man named George, 78 years old, who had been told by his physical therapist to slow down his morning walks. He resisted for weeks. He had walked fast his whole life, he said. Walking slowly felt like giving up. But he tried it, grudgingly, reluctantly, with a kind of private shame he never fully admitted to. What he noticed by the third week was that his lower back hurt less, that his knees, which had ached for years, were quieter in the mornings, that he was sleeping more deeply. He could not explain it logically, but his body had. His body had been trying to tell him for years, "Slow down, and I will take care of you." The loss is not in the slowing. The loss is in the years of pushing past the body's honest signal and wondering why the joints protested, why the fatigue did not lift, why rest never quite felt like enough. Every slow, careful, deliberate step is a negotiation between you and the body that has carried you this far. And the body, when listened to, has a great deal of wisdom left to offer. But here is something I want you to sit with for a moment before we continue. Not because it is comfortable, but because it is true. Every time you have judged yourself for moving slowly, you were judging your body for trying to protect you. That judgment deserves to be set down now. Point 3. The heart of a person who walks at a pace that is natural for their age works more efficiently. And cardiac efficiency, not cardiac speed, is what defines longevity. The heart is not impressed by pace. It is not keeping score of how quickly you cross a parking lot or move through a hallway. What the heart cares about, what it has always cared about, is consistency, rhythm, and sustainability. And when you walk at a pace that is genuinely comfortable for your body, the heart operates in what cardiologists describe as its most efficient range, the zone where it is working, but not straining. The zone where every beat is earning its keep without demanding more than the system can give. What happens when seniors chronically push past their comfortable walking pace? And this is the part that rarely gets mentioned, is a subtle but compounding pattern of cardiac overload, not the dramatic kind, not the kind that announces itself, the quiet kind, the kind that shows up as fatigue you cannot explain, as blood pressure that climbs higher than it should on ordinary days, as a tiredness that sleep does not fully fix. The body is always communicating. The question is always whether we are listening. There was a retired teacher named Evelyn, 76 years old, who had been rushing everywhere since she was a young mother of 4. Rushing was her identity. Even in retirement, she moved as though there were somewhere urgent to be. Her cardiologist noticed, during a routine monitoring session, that her resting heart rate was higher than expected, not dramatically, but enough to ask questions. When he learned about her pace, her habit of pushing, her discomfort with anything that looked like slowness, he told her something that stopped her completely. "Evelyn, your heart has been running a marathon every day for 30 years. It is asking you very gently if it might walk instead." She went home that afternoon and sat with that sentence for a long time. When we refuse to hear what the body is saying, it does not stop saying it. It simply says it louder, in ways we cannot ignore. And by then, the years of listening that were available have passed. The heart knows its rhythm. After 70, one of the most loving things you can do for it is trust that rhythm, even when the world around you moves faster. Point 4. People who walk slowly after 70 are significantly less likely to fall. And a single serious fall, for someone over 70, can alter the entire trajectory of the years that remain. This is a truth that doctors speak among themselves with a gravity that rarely makes it fully into the conversations they have with patients. Falls after 70 are not simply accidents. They are turning points. They are the moments that too often divide a life into a before and an after. A before when things were a certain way, and an after when they were permanently, irreversibly different. Hip fractures, head injuries. The long road of recovery that for many seniors is longer and harder than anyone prepared them for. And the fear that follows, the quiet daily fear of the floor, that changes how a person moves through their own home, through their own life. Slow walkers fall less, not because they are more cautious in a fearful way, but because their body has already found its balance point. When you walk deliberately, you are in constant, quiet conversation with the ground beneath you. Your body is never fully committed to a momentum it cannot control. You are at every step recoverable. There was a woman named Ruth, 79 years old, who had 2 neighbors of similar age. One walked briskly, still proud of her pace, still moving the way she had moved at 60. The other, Ruth herself, had slowed considerably and felt quiet shame about it every time the 3 of them were together. One winter morning on an icy path, the brisker neighbor went down hard. The recovery took 7 months. Ruth, with her careful, unhurried step, had planted her foot differently that same morning and felt the ice shift, and stopped, just stopped, and waited, and was fine. She thought about that morning for a long time afterward, and it changed something in the way she understood her own pace. The cost of speed is sometimes paid all at once, in a single unguarded moment, in a fraction of a second when the body was moving faster than it could protect itself. Slowness is not fragility. Slowness is care. And after 70, to care for yourself in motion is one of the greatest acts of wisdom available to you. Nobody in your life is going to say this to your face. They love you too much, or they are too busy, or they simply do not know how. So I will say it here. You have spent decades moving at a pace the world demanded of you. The world no longer has that claim on your body. You do. Point 5. Slow walkers tend to be more present in their daily life, and presence at any age is the foundation of mental health, memory retention, and emotional resilience. This is not something that shows up easily in a study, because it is not the kind of thing that fits neatly into a data column. But the physicians and psychologists who work most closely with the elderly will tell you, often quietly and almost privately, that the seniors who seem most at peace, the ones who are sharpest in conversation, most emotionally grounded, least prone to the anxiety and depression that so often accompany aging, are very frequently the ones who have made peace with their pace. They are the ones who are, quite literally, in less of a hurry. When you walk slowly, you see more. You hear more. The cardinal on the branch beside the path. The way the morning light falls on a particular corner of the street you have walked 100 times. The smell of something baking from a house you pass. These are not small things. These are the exact things that the mind needs to stay alive, to stay curious, to stay connected to the world it is moving through. Fast walking, for all its cardiovascular benefits, tends to move through the world. Slow walking tends to inhabit it. There was a man named Walter, 81 years old, who had been a fast mover his whole life. Driven, efficient, purposeful. After his wife passed, he found himself slowing down on his morning walks without consciously deciding to. He thought it was grief. It probably was, in part, but he also noticed slowly that the walks were becoming the most alive part of his day, that he was noticing things he had walked past for 30 years without seeing, that he was thinking more clearly on the slow days than he ever had on the fast ones. His doctor, during a cognitive screening, noted that Walter was performing remarkably well for his age. Walter thought about the walks. He believed they were connected. He may very well have been right. The mind that is given time to settle, that is not always rushing forward, is a mind that retains more, that processes more cleanly, that is more available to the moments and people around it. Your slow walk is not taking you away from life. It may be the thing that keeps you most fully inside it. Point 6. The cultures in the world with the highest concentrations of people who live past 90 and 100, the so-called blue zones, share one common physical habit: unhurried, consistent, daily movement at a natural pace. Sardinia, Okinawa, the Nicoya Peninsula, Ikaria, the Seventh-day Adventist communities of Loma Linda, California. These are the places researchers have studied most intensely when they want to understand what human longevity actually looks like. And what they found, when they looked at how these populations move, was not vigorous exercise programs or competitive athletic culture. It was ordinary daily movement, gardening, walking to a neighbor's house, carrying something from one place to another, performed at an unhurried, sustainable, completely natural pace, every single day. For decades. These were not people concerned with their gait speed. They were not checking their time per mile. They were simply moving through their lives at the pace their lives required, and their bodies, given that grace, lasted, not despite the slowness, because of it. Because a body that is not chronically overstressed, not constantly asked to perform beyond its comfortable range, accumulates wear differently. It preserves itself differently. It ages differently. There was a woman in a small village in Sardinia, documented by researchers studying the region's extraordinary number of centenarians, who was asked, at 97, what her secret was. She looked at the interpreter with genuine puzzlement. She did not have a secret. She woke in the morning and moved through her day the way she always had, slowly, intentionally, without drama. She tended her small garden. She walked to her neighbor. She came home. She had been doing this for 70 years. She expected to keep doing it. She did not understand what the researchers were so interested in. To her, it was just a life. What we have done, in the Western world, is mistake urgency for vitality. We have taught ourselves that fast means healthy and slow, means failing. The oldest people on earth are the quiet correction to that story. What comes next? The final 2 points of this conversation are the ones I most want you to carry with you. The next few minutes are the reason this video exists. Stay with me. Point 7. Walking slowly is an act of listening to the body. And the body, after 70 years of serving you, has earned the right to be heard. There's a kind of arrogance in ignoring what the body is saying. Not the arrogance of cruelty, but the arrogance of habit. The habit of overriding signals, of pushing through, of treating discomfort as an obstacle rather than a message. Most of us learned this habit young. Life demanded it. There were children to care for, jobs to keep, responsibilities that did not wait for aching knees or tired bones. You pushed through, you kept going, you did what needed to be done. And that was strength, real strength, for many years. But the body that has been listened to is a different body from the one that has been overridden. The body that has heard changes. It softens in the right places. It relaxes the grip of chronic tension it has held for years. It begins to trust that the person it belongs to is finally paying attention. And it responds to that trust, the way any living thing responds to being genuinely cared for. There was a retired man named James, 73 years old, who had been an athlete in his youth and never fully forgave his body for the ways it had changed. He argued with it daily, pushing himself on his walks, keeping pace with men 10 years younger, refusing to accept what his hips and his left knee had been telling him for months. One afternoon he sat down on a bench midway through his route, not because he planned to, but because his body simply said enough in a way he could not ignore. He sat there for 20 minutes, breathing, watching the world move around him, and something shifted, not in his body, not yet, but in the argument he had been having with it. He stopped fighting. He listened. He went home and the next morning walked half the distance at half the pace, and felt, for the first time in years, that the walk had been for him, rather than against himself. The body you have is the body of someone who has lived. Treat it accordingly, not with pity, not with impatience, with the respect you would give to anything that has carried something precious for a very long time. Before this conversation ends, I want to say something to you that has nothing to do with science, something I have been building toward since the beginning. Do not leave before we get there. What I am about to share is the reason I made this video. Deep reflection segment. There are photographs. You probably have them somewhere, in an album or a box, or tucked inside a drawer that you do not open very often because you are not always sure how it will feel when you do. Photographs of yourself walking through a life that moved faster than this one. On a beach, perhaps, chasing someone small and laughing, or climbing a set of stairs in a building you once worked in, briefcase in hand, the world arranged around your forward momentum. Or in a backyard, moving between the grill and the table and the garden with the automatic confidence of someone who has never had to think about where their feet are going. Those photographs are true. That person was real. That pace was yours, and it belonged to that chapter, and there is nothing wrong with missing it, quietly, privately on the evenings when the house is still and the light falls a certain way, and you feel the distance between then and now more clearly than you usually allow yourself to. But here is the other thing that is true. You are still in a photograph. Not one that has been taken yet, but one that is being composed right now. In the morning light through your kitchen window, in the careful way you move from room to room, in the deliberate step you take on an uneven sidewalk, in the pause you give yourself before a flight of stairs. That is a photograph too. And the person in it is not less than the person in the earlier ones. That person is more experienced, more aware of what a body costs, more honest about what time means, more grateful for an ordinary morning than the younger version ever had the wisdom to be. Time has passed, a great deal of it. And some of what passed was beautiful, and some of it was very hard, and some of it you would live again in a heartbeat, and some of it you are quietly relieved to have survived. You have done things that were not easy. You have held things together that wanted to fall apart. You have shown up for people who needed you, and sometimes for people who never acknowledged it, and sometimes for people who are no longer here to be shown up for. And you did it all in a body that was always in the background, doing its quiet work. The slowness is not the end of the story. It is a different chapter, and different does not mean lesser. There is something that happens in a person who has stopped moving too fast to notice the world they are moving through. Something opens. And what opens when you let it is something that the rushing years never quite had room for, the raw truth. And now I want to say something that I have been building toward since the beginning of this conversation. Something that the science supports, but that the science is not really about. Something more personal than any data point. There is a specific kind of pain that many people carry after 70, and it does not have a medical name. It is the pain of feeling like you are becoming less capable, less relevant, less like the person you used to recognize in the mirror. It is the pain of watching younger people move through the world at a speed you no longer match and feeling even though you know better, even though part of you knows this is not logical, that you have somehow fallen behind, that the world is moving on without you, that your slowness is visible, and that what people see when they see it is decline. I want to speak to that pain directly, not to fix it, not to argue it away with facts, just to say, I know it is there, and I know you carry it carefully because you have always been someone who carries things carefully. There was a woman named Clara, 77 years old, who walked with a cane after a knee replacement 3 years earlier. She hated the cane. Not because it hurt or inconvenienced her, but because of what she feared it said to the people who saw her. She began avoiding certain places, certain gatherings, certain situations where she would have to walk in front of people. She shrank her world, quietly, gradually, in ways she did not fully notice until she counted the things she had stopped doing. The cane had not taken those things. The fear of how the cane looked had taken them. One afternoon, her granddaughter, 8 years old, uninhibited, completely free of the story Clara had told herself, reached up and took Clara's hand on the side that held the cane and said simply, "I like walking with you, Grandma. You never rush me." Clara cried on the way home, not from sadness, from something that had been waiting a long time to be released. You are not invisible. You are not diminished. You are not behind. You are exactly where a person with your history, your body, and your years should be. And the fact that you are still here, still moving, still searching for something that feels true, that means something. It means more than a pace. It means more than a measurement. It means you are still in the conversation that matters most. Legacy Wisdom segment. But before this conversation ends, I want to speak to something different. Something that does not get said enough. Not in doctors' offices, not in families, not in the content that is made for people your age. Something that is true and important, and that you deserve to hear plainly. The pace at which you move through the world right now carries something that no fast walker has. It carries the wisdom of someone who has already been through the worst of it, the crises that looked unsurvivable and were survived, the losses that felt final and were somehow absorbed, the years of showing up when it would have been easier not to. You have a relationship with difficulty that younger people do not yet have, cannot yet have, because it is earned only through time, and they have not had enough of it. When a grandchild sits beside you on a porch, or at a kitchen table, or in a car on the way somewhere unremarkable, and you say something that you learned from 60 or 70 years of living, something simple, something unhurried, it lands differently than advice from someone younger. It lands with the weight of proof. This is what wisdom is, not information, not strategy. The proof that it is possible to come through something and still be sitting on a porch, still drinking tea, still being present for the people who need you. There was a man named Thomas, 80 years old, who believed genuinely that he no longer had anything useful to give. His children were grown and capable. His grandchildren were becoming their own people. He moved slowly. He tired easily. He felt on most days like a version of himself that was smaller than the version that had mattered. Then his youngest grandson, 17 years old, in the middle of a crisis that Thomas could not fully understand, a modern crisis, a digital crisis, a kind of loneliness Thomas had no direct experience with, called him. Not his parents, not a friend. Thomas, and sat on the phone for an hour, saying very little, listening to his grandfather breathe and occasionally say something quiet and unhurried and impossibly right. Afterward, the boy said, "You're the only person who didn't try to fix it. You just stayed." Thomas didn't understand fully what he had done, but what he had done was everything. Your presence is not a lesser version of what you used to offer. It is something different, and in many cases it is something more. The person who walks slowly, who sits without urgency, who is no longer in a rush to be somewhere else. That person is available in a way that the rushed world rarely is, and that availability is a gift, one that only you can give. Empowerment shift. So what do you do with all of this? Not in a dramatic way, not with a plan or a program or a resolution. What does it look like in the ordinary fabric of tomorrow morning to live what this conversation has been pointing toward? It looks like this. It looks like stepping outside at whatever hour the day begins for you, and walking at the pace that is honest for your body on that particular morning. Not the pace you think you should be walking. Not the pace you walked last year or 10 years ago. The pace of right now. And as you walk, noticing the things that the faster version of yourself would have walked past without seeing. The quality of the light. The temperature of the air on your face. The way your breath feels in the cool of the morning or the warmth of the afternoon. These are not small things. These are the very texture of a life that is still being lived. Fully. In the present tense. It looks like giving yourself the kind of permission you have probably given freely to everyone else in your life, but withheld from yourself. Permission to be where you are. To move at the speed your body has chosen. To stop comparing this chapter to the earlier ones, and to allow this one to have its own value, its own beauty, its own kind of fullness that cannot be measured in pace or distance or time. There are people in your life, perhaps people you do not fully know yet, who need the version of you that walks slowly, who need the unhurried presence, who need someone who is not rushing past them, who will sit still, who will listen without checking something, who will be there in the quiet way that the world increasingly does not know how to be. That person, the one who moves at the pace the body has chosen, is not less than who you were. That person is who you have been becoming all along without knowing. Final closing. We began this conversation with a feeling, a quiet, private feeling that you probably recognized the moment it was named, the feeling of moving a little slower than you once did, and wondering, in the space behind the wondering, whether that meant something you were afraid to look at directly. That was where we started, and what I hope you are carrying now, as we come to the end of this, is something different. Not certainty, not the absence of difficulty, but something more valuable than either of those things. A different way of understanding what your body has been telling you, an understanding that the slowness was never the problem. The story you were telling yourself about the slowness, that was the thing that needed to change. You have walked through more in this life than you will ever be able to fully account for. You have moved through grief and change and loss and love and ordinary Tuesdays and extraordinary moments that came without warning. And you did it all in a body that was always doing its quiet, faithful work. That body is still doing that work. Right now, even as you sit here, it is doing the only job it has ever had, keeping you here in this world for one more day. There are mornings still ahead, paths still ahead, people who are not yet aware of how much they are going to need an unhurried hour in your company. Let that be enough to take you to the door tomorrow morning. And when you step outside, take the pace that is yours. Not the pace of regret, not the pace of comparison, not the pace of a world that has never understood what it means to have lived this long and still be walking. Your pace, yours. Take care of yourself, because time never waits. Call to action. If something in this conversation touched you, if it reminded you of something you have been quietly carrying or gave a name to a feeling you have held without one, then share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Not for this channel, for them. Because there is someone in your life right now who is judging themselves for the same thing you were judging yourself for when this video began. And they deserve to hear this too. And if you would like to continue this conversation, there is another video waiting for you that speaks to the other thing most seniors are never told about their bodies after 70. What your sleep is actually telling you, and why it matters more than almost anything else. I will see you there.